Today we're going to study the Satya Vibhanga Sutta, M141. And this is translated as SD Sutta Discovery 11.11. Volume 11, Chapter 11. And this number is very coincidentally significant. 11.11. It should be studied with SD 1.1. SD 1.1 and 11.11. Satya Vibhanga. Satya means the truth, no? As in the Four Noble Truths. Vibhanga means analysis. So the suttas in this chapter of the Majjhima, they have the word Vibhanga. So the analysis, for example, of the elements, Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, which we will probably study at the end of the year. And analysis of how we can calm our conduct and conduct ourselves in an advantageous way in the Dhamma and so on, Arana Vibhanga Sutta. So this is a Satya Vibhanga Sutta, M141, the discourse on the analysis of the truths. So notice here in Pali, it's just Satya. So when in Pali we say Satya, in our mind, we can say it can be singular, it can be plural, okay, depending on the context. So in this sutta, it's not only about the Four Noble Truths, it's also about spiritual friendship, as we will discover about Sariputta and Moggallana. In fact, while I was reflecting on this sutta, I'm very happy to notice from the way the sutta is taught, it's like the source of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the source of the record, the sutta as we have it today, the Dhammacakka Sutta. Okay, so these are just preliminaries to whet your interest. When I come to that point of the sutta, I will elaborate. All right. So let us look at this sutta itself. Right.
4, 12.
Page 215. Put that up. Okay. All right. Here we are. Satya Vibhanga Sutta, the discourse on the analysis of the truths. M141. So you can see this Majjhima has 152 suttas. So this is in the last collection, the third collection. So this is M141. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Blessed One was staying in the deer park at Isipatana near Benares. Now that sounds very familiar, right? The deer park, Isipatana, Benares. And that's the place where the Buddha gave the first discourse during the first year, the very first year of the ministry, as we say, to the 5 monks. So that launched the Buddha's teaching. All right. So here the Buddha is teaching the monks again on the truths. But he does this in a very special way. This is what we're going to see in this sutta. Right? There the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, Bhikshus, Bhante, the monks answered, the Blessed One in essence. Now you notice in almost every sutta, especially the long suttas, you have the Buddha addressing the monks and the monks replying. There's always this human response, if you like. There's this connection, right? So even today, as the Buddha is addressing us, the Buddha is addressing you by name, each of you addressing me. They say, do this, study this sutta. Right? And so we say Bhante. We see the Buddha in our minds and we say Bhante. Okay, or we say Namo Tassa. The Blessed One said this. Okay, so now the Buddha gives a very short introduction, right? The Buddha says, Bhikshus, the peerless, incomparable wheel of truth, Dharma Chakra. Okay? Dharma Chakra is English. Okay? Of course, it's Sanskrit, but here, when we say Dharma Chakra in English, we know what it is. Okay? Pali is Dhamma Chakra. It's a wheel with 8 spokes. Okay? 4 main spokes, and then you have altogether 8. So that represents the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. So this peerless wheel of truth, Dhammachakra, that cannot be stopped by any recluse or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or anyone in the world. Once the truth has been told, it's impossible to disprove it. How do you disprove impermanence? How do you disprove nirvana? No one has succeeded since the Buddha's time until now. They can try to say things and you know, write books about it, but nobody has succeeded in proving the Buddha wrong. You know, the funny thing is we have many Buddhists themselves who are saying things which are opposite to what the Buddha has taught, and in many ways confusing a lot of people, right? So, but still the Dharma is there. The Buddha's teaching is still there if you look for it. So times like this are very rare where we can go straight into the suttas, study it. And when we do this, the chance of other people knowing it is also there. In the future, have a better chance of understanding this sutta and for their own happiness. So the Buddha continues, this incomparable sutta has been set in motion in the Dhamma, in a deer park at Isipatana near Benares. So the verb here is set in motion. So it's the wheel. The wheel has to turn. It has to be pushed and then it turns, right? So the wheel is only useful when it is moving, when it is turning. If it doesn't turn, it will not be able to move. And a cart has 4 wheels, right? So you have the 4 wheels of the 4 truths, for example. So you have to move this cart. We are like this cart, and the cart moves on the path, the Eightfold Path, right? So it's a very beautiful metaphor. There you are. See, the Buddha then says, by this teaching has been given by the Tathagata. The Buddha does come. He comes by himself. It arises at the right time. That's the meaning of does come, Tathagata. The worthy one is Arahat, worthy one, the self-awakened one, okay, Buddha, Sammasambuddha. No one awakens him. He does it by himself. So this shows self-effort that any one of us can also awaken in this way. But the Buddha is the first to do it in our time. That is the proclaiming, teaching, defining, establishing, revealing, expounding, analyzing, clarifying of the 4 noble truths. Now notice there are 7 verbs here, right? Proclaiming, teaching, defining, establishing, revealing, expounding, analyzing, clarifying. Okay, 8, no? So 8 verbs here. So very interesting, right? So you can relate to anything 8. It is good, like Eightfold Path, if you like. But here, one way of looking at this is you can say this is a string of adjectives, a string of synonyms. They have the same meaning, right? So it is from this kind of string of synonyms that the first dictionary in the world was compiled. It's called the Abhidhana Padipika, around the 10th century, I think. So this person whose name is Moggallana, he's not the Moggallana, the Buddha's left-hand monk. He has the same name. He collected all these kinds of string of verbs and nouns and synonyms and showed that they all have the same meaning, right? That's one way of putting it. Why the Buddha mentioned all this is to help the audience pay attention, because everything is given orally, right? They don't have notes like this, beautifully printed. Everything is spoken live, okay? And then the 4 noble truths, of the 4 noble truths. And then the Buddha say, of what 4? What are the 4? Now, all this we know. We say, oh, I've heard this before. Now, always remember this. When we say, I've heard this before, right? Be careful not to be misled into the wrong view that, oh, now I understand, I've heard it before. You heard it before, yes, but understanding it is something else. Like we have to awaken, right? So that takes time. So this is just like the platform. It's like this platform that the ladder is strongly put on it, and you are climbing this ladder away from the floods, like step by step over the rungs. So we are practicing in that way, bit by bit. Section 3. 1. The proclaiming, teaching, defining, establishing, revealing, expounding, analyzing, and clarifying of the noble truth, that is suffering. So notice the register of 8 synonyms are repeated here, because now the Buddha is defining the Four Noble Truths. First, that there is this reality, suffering. A lot of people don't like the word suffering, and then they end up canceling Buddhism, right? It's called a cancel attitude. Yeah? But we shall not think that way. It's a problem of the English word. The Pali word is dukkha, dukkha. Yeah? Dukkha, difficult to tolerate. Du plus ka. Okay. So there are many things in life. If you look around, it's not easy to tolerate. At any age, there's always something we have difficult to tolerate, something which troubles us. Later, the Buddha will give details. What are these? What is it that we have to suffer, that we try to tolerate, but it's not easy. It's because we do not know how to tolerate it. And why is that? Then you have the second noble truth. The 8 synonyms are repeated, and then it is regarding the arising of suffering. So the keyword here is arising. I followed the Chakun Prayut, Ajahn Prayut, in the leading philosopher living. He's still alive today, one of my old teacher friends in Thailand. As he suggests that we should use the translation arising for samudaya, sang udaya, rather than origin. Because origin, it means as if the suffering comes from that situation. It doesn't come from that situation. It is conditionality, right? Later on, we find out how does this suffering arise in a moment, okay? So I won't give too much away. No? So there is this arising of suffering, like the rising of the sun, if you like. So what rises will also set, but it will rise again, like that. So there is the arising of suffering. It has the starting point. And then it has the ending point. There's the truth number 3. The proclaiming, teaching, defining, establishing, revealing, expounding, analyzing, and clarifying of the noble truth, that is the ending of suffering. These are all potential possibilities. And then the Buddha finally says number 4, there is the teaching of the, I use one word for all the 8 words, teaching of the path leading to the ending of suffering. So you have suffering, arising, ending, path. Those are the keywords. Now this is called the teaching model. 1, 2, 3, 4. No? There is the practice model of the Four Noble Truths, found, for example, in the Mahasalayatanika Sutta. You have 1, 2, 4, 3. 1, 2, 4, 3. In other words, you have the truth of suffering, truth of the arising of suffering, truth of the path, and then truth of the ending. My understanding is this version, this model is actually older. It's not so well known, but it's the older version. Why? Because first you notice there is suffering, then you notice the arising of suffering, and then you want to end it. You say, so you follow the path. Right? And then when you follow the path, you reach the ending of suffering, which is nirvana. So this is another model, 1, 2, 4, 3, right? So this is to remind us, that's why wise teachers will tell us, early Buddhism has no dogmas. There's no fixed teaching. The teachings can be reworded in different ways, because words are just words. It points to the truth, depending on the purpose of the teaching. So suffering, arising, ending, path, 1, 2, 3, 4. is for the purpose of teaching, to follow the sequence in terms of teaching. In terms of practice, we look at suffering, try to understand it, then we look at the arising of suffering, then we work to end it, and then we gain the fruit of the ending, the path, the sainthood, if you like, and that's the actual ending of suffering. 3. Bhikshus, the peerless wheel of truth that cannot be stopped by any recluse, Brahmin, or Deva, or Mara, or Brahma, or by anyone in the world, has been set in motion in the deer park at Isipatana near Benares by the Tathagata Daskam, the worthy one, the fully self-awakened one. And then, in other words, this is a repetition, a kind of, imagine how the Buddha is saying this is a joyful statement, right? We don't repeat things if we're not joyful in doing so. So every word, there is a sense of joy, of freedom. We're able to say these beautiful words. It's about the noble truths. Nobody can stop it. Whether they are humans or non-humans, they are Mara himself or even the high gods. They can mess up the world, but this one truth, this Four Noble Truth, which is a set of universal truths, they cannot stop it. They can hide it, they can make us forget it, but it is there. It's possible to find it. Okay, let's go further down. Right, so then the first part is finished, all right? Now, the Buddha only says that about the Four Noble Truths. So basically the Buddha is saying, well, you're here in the deer park, and this is where I gave the first sermon, right? Because we don't hear such statements because they seem to be just like a chat, like a friendly chat. But surely the Buddha would have said that. Surely the other monks would have known that. So they say, wow, we are here in the deer park at Isipatana near Benares. This is where the Buddha gave the first discourse. So here we have the record of the Buddha saying just that. So we have to use our imagination a bit. Here, the Buddha is in this place where he gave the first discourse. Surely the monks will be very excited and happy about this, and they want to know, what did the Buddha teach? Because when the Buddha gave the first sermon, first discourse, almost all of them were not there. Most of them were not there. Even Sariputta Moggallana were not there. Ananda was not there. So the Buddha probably has to teach it again. Now the question we should ask ourselves is this. Is the Buddha going to teach the suttas exactly word for word? Not necessarily so. He may reword some of these teachings, depending on the audience. Maybe he feels he should maybe add some extra details. The teaching is still the same, but the wording is slightly different. And they show this wonderful connection, right? So that part we are not told. And my idea is that some monks, we call them the reciting monks, the monks who recite the suttas and who put together the suttas, especially those who joined the first council. They got together and they say, okay, how shall we put this first discourse together, all right, so that we can recite it and remember it. They don't have tape recorders like the way my talk is recorded now. So they will recite to each other, and then there are elders who are very old there, the 5 monks probably might be there, or they will check with the 5 monks. They will recite these teachings, and then they frame it nicely so that it can be recited properly, and others will learn it. That's how the suttas are transmitted, as a living teaching. So that part, that is why I was thinking, is very interesting. This is where probably the Dhammacakka Pavattana Sutta came into being, where the idea of putting together the first discourse must have a reason, although it's not mentioned directly here. This is the closest we have anyway, all right? And there are many other suttas. If you look at in the front introduction, under related suttas, you find there are lots of other suttas connected, which gives us a very good idea of the background of the first discourse, including the Vinaya also, by the way. Okay, but most of the Vinaya reports are much later than the suttas anyway. Okay. All right, so after the Buddha has given that introduction to the Four Noble Truths and his first discourse in the Isipatana, he says something new, section 5 now. Section 5, he says, emulate Sariputta and Moggallana bhikshus. Follow their example, emulate, follow their example. Associate with Sariputta and Moggallana bhikshus. They, bhikshus, are wise and helpful to their companions in the holy life, right? So now Sariputta and Moggallana became monks. They approached the Buddha probably in the second year, I think. And they became monks and they practiced, and then they awakened within weeks. And then they must have, stayed on for a while before the sutta was taught. So the Buddha spoke of their wisdom, of especially the wisdom of Sariputta, and also his compassion, and the great meditation of Moggallana, and also Moggallana's compassion. See, we often see Sariputta as someone who is the foremost in wisdom, but he's also foremost in compassion, as you will see in introductory notes. He is very caring of the monks, especially the practicing monks. And we can see in this sutta. Let me just read on before I say more. So, they, bhikshus, are wise and helpful to their companions in the holy life. Wise and helpful. This is the ideal teacher, the spiritual friend, wise and helpful. Sariputta, bhikshus, is like a child giver. Okay, this is a special term for mother, child giver. Moggallana is like the child's nurse. Okay, so the Buddha is speaking in metaphorical terms here. Sariputta is like a mother, and Moggallana is like the child's nurse. Right, so you got mother, give birth to the child, and then the nurse takes care of the child, raises the child. The meaning? Next line. Sariputta, bhikshus, trains others for the fruit of stream winning. So Sariputta would train these new monks how to let go of their past, lay life, practice, reflect on impermanence, and attain stream winning. And from then, Moggallana takes over, teach them how to go deeper into their meditation, how to attain jhana, and then go on to attain arahathood. So this is how these two teachers work together. Sariputta Bhikshus is able to proclaim, teach, define, establish, reveal, analyze, verify the Four Noble Truths in detail. Notice this, right? The Buddha gave the teaching in brief that says, the Moggallana, Sariputta is wise. He's able to explain what I've just given briefly in detail. Okay, close quote. 6. The Blessed One said this. Having said this, the wayfarer Sugata rose from his seat and entered his dwelling. So he went into rest. No? Okay, so the monk was sitting quietly for a while. Then, not long after the Blessed One had gone, the Venerable Sariputta addressed the monks thus. Avuso, bhikshus. Avuso, bhikkhavu. Okay. Avuso, the monks replied to the Venerable Sariputta in essence. So notice here the monks addressed the Buddha addressed the Sariputta as Avuso also. So it's probably a young monk. So this way we know the sutta is quite early, because otherwise the monks also used to have Bhante, especially after Buddha's time, after Buddha has passed away. Because that's the Buddha's instruction before he passed away, that junior monks must address the teacher, senior monk as Bhante. The Venerable Sariputta said this. Okay, so this is the cue. The Venerable Sariputta said this. This is the teaching given by Sariputta. So this sutta is special. This Majjhima Nikaya 141 is special. It was briefly started by the Buddha, but it's the Sariputta who gave the teaching, and of course the teaching approved by the Buddha himself. So here in the next section you find right to the end the Buddha's going to talk, Sariputta is going to talk about the Four Noble Truths in detail. Okay, let's look a bit more before we take a break. Four Noble Truths, Section 8, Avuso, the peerless will of truth that cannot be stopped by any recluse or Brahmin or Deva or Mara or Brahma or by anyone in the world, has been set in motion in the deer park at Isipatana near Benares by the Tathagata Daskam, the worthy one, the fully self-awakened one. That is, the proclaiming, teaching, defining, establishing, revealing, expounding, analyzing, clarifying of the Four Noble Truths. So notice that Sariputta says the exact words as spoken by the Buddha to show that he accepts his teachings. It's not something new. What are the four? And then he says the same thing as the Buddha said: suffering, the arising of suffering, ending of suffering, and the path leading to the ending of suffering. Right, so that's section 9. Okay, so we go further down. So then here, these monks are probably new, right? So Sariputta repeats the teaching a few times in a cycle, we say, so that they remember this, the significance of this important teaching. Of what four? The 9.3 again, the Four Noble Truths are repeated to make sure that the monks remember. Okay. All right. So now before I go on to the details under the Four Noble Truths in detail, the section 10 onwards, we will take a break, 5 minutes. So we'll come back at 9 and we continue with the rest of the sutta.
Okay, thank you, Prabhupada. We took a 5 minutes break now.
Okay, let's continue. So now Sariputta defines the Four Noble Truths one by one in detail, okay, including the Eightfold Path also. And what avuso? Avuso here is plural, is the noble truth that is suffering. Notice that I've translated Arya Satya as the noble truth that is suffering. So here the truth and suffering are not different. The suffering is the truth. It's not something invented by the Buddha. Right? If you say noble truth of suffering, it is like something that the Buddha invented. But here, the Buddha recognizes it when he first saw, even before he became Buddha, when he was a young man, he saw the three sides: an old man, sick man, dead man. That's a metaphorical vision. Okay, and then he saw the fourth side is the renunciation. Right. So it's like a path. Okay, number 4, the fourth view is like a path. He's getting out of suffering. So you see that hint even early in his life before his awakening. So if you have difficulty with the word suffering, you can take it as something difficult to tolerate. For example, birth is suffering. Birth is difficult to tolerate, right? Decay is suffering, number 2, brackets 2. Decay is suffering. Decay here is a broad term for old age, oxidation, any kind of rotting away. From the moment we are born, we age. We only give different terms for the different phases of life. Decay is suffering. Decay is not easy to tolerate. Aging, decay or aging is not easy to tolerate. Now here there's an extra in the Vinaya, disease is added in. Okay. Then number 3, death is suffering. Death is not easy to accept, to tolerate. Of course, someone may say the person who's dying is gone, but that's true. But the process of it is not easy. And when the person dies, the living suffers if the person is good. Grief or sorrow, if you like, lamentation, physical pain, mental pain, and despair are suffering. Okay. Now then the later versions, for example, the Satipatthana Sutta, you find two more. Vinaya also records two more items. To be associated with the unpleasant is suffering. To be separated from the pleasant is suffering. And then here in this sutta continues a fifth item, not getting what one wants is suffering. When we cannot get something we desire, it's difficult for us. In short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. So this is the core teaching. So notice in this sutta, Satya Vibhanga Sutta, there are 5 aspects of suffering: birth, decay, death, grief, etc., not getting, and then 5 aggregates. Okay, 5 things. Whereas in the Vinaya version and Maha Satipatthana Sutta, there are 8. The usual rule is that if the set is longer, it's likely to be expanded later version, of course, during the Buddha's time. The shorter ones normally are older. So here the original sutta is the older sutta, this Satya Vibhanga is only 6 aspects of suffering. Now these 6 aspects, there are 3 aspects, but they're all there. They're quite complete. For example, if you take 1, 2, 3, 4, they refer to dukkha, the suffering of suffering, meaning bodily suffering, physical suffering. And then number 5 is viparinama dukkha, suffering due to change, due to impermanence. Okay. And then the number 6 is the universal suffering. This is the one that the Buddha teaches for us to practice to overcome the suffering that is the 5 aggregates. This is the sankhara dukkha, the nature of all things that exist. So this is found in what's called the Dukkha Sutta. Sariputta Dukkha Sutta. These 3 aspects are mentioned. The 3 aspects are the same. Okay, so all these are in the notes. You can look up in your free time. All right, so this is the definition, section 10. Then after that, Sariputta goes into each one and defines it. Okay, let's look at birth, section 11. Okay, and what also is birth? In other words, why is it called suffering? Being born, becoming, descending into the womb, arising, generating, manifesting of the aggregates, obtaining the sense basis in various beings, in various groups of beings, here and there. This also is called birth. So here already you see a sense of like Abhidhamma style. So it's also Sariputta style. That is why the later Abhidhamma teachers, they look up to Sariputta as a kind of founder of Abhidhamma, if you like. Okay, so it is like a dictionary already, defining birth. All these are kind of almost synonyms or synonyms and near synonyms describing different kinds of birth. And all births end in decay, in death, even among the gods. You see, the thing about the gods is they are reborn, enjoying great happiness. They go on playing, enjoying themselves like children, forgetting to eat and so on. And like toys running out of battery, suddenly they stop functioning. And then they drop from their heavenly state. And according to another sutta, these devas, they die unhappy. And because of that, why do they die unhappy? Because they know, oh, I'm going to lose all this happiness, all this joy, and then they pass away. So their rebirth is not a good one. They fall down into the suffering states, even to the hell states. Unless they are stream winners, then they are calm and peaceful. Stream winners and once returners. Of course, the non-returners will be reborn in their own realm, the pure abodes. Our hearts are not reborn. Okay. So with that understanding, we can say it's possible for devas to be stream winners and once returners, right? So that's one way of putting it. So remember the sutta. This is where I mentioned this answer. Yeah, because sometimes we will ask again. We talk about devas being reborn as stream winners or stream winners arising among the devas. So this during the talk on the Satya Vibhanda Sutta M141. Okay, next 12. This is the second aspect of the nature of suffering, second of the 6. And what also is decay? Aging, decay, broken teeth, gray hair, wrinkled skin, the dwindling away of one's years, the weakness of the sense faculties in various beings, in various groups of beings here and there. This also is called decay. We all will go through this as we age, at my age, I'm seeing all this happening. 13 is the third aspect of suffering. And what also is death? How do you define death? Sariputta says, falling away. Okay, falling away here is usually we use for the devas. Falling away, passing away, breaking up. It's quite common among beings, or human beings especially, breaking up. Disappearance. Devas also happen, they just disappear. Death, dying, one's time being up, or completion of one's time or lifespan. Breaking up of the aggregates, discarding of the body, or uprooting of the life faculty. That's extra definition. In various beings, in various groups of beings here and there. This also is called death. In other words, it is universal. 14. And what also is sorrow? Also, one's being touched or affected by some misfortune, by some painful state, sorrow, grief, distress, inner grief, overwhelming inner woe, very powerful sadness, depression, and so on. This is called sorrow. Okay, further down. How about lamentation? What is lamentation? Section 16. Also, whatever bodily pain, bodily unpleasantness, painful or unpleasant feeling arising from the bodily contact. Oh, sorry, I read the wrong one, 15. Eh? And what also is lamentation? Also being touched by some painful state, by some misfortune, crying, weeping, wailing, lamenting, bewailing, lamentation. This also is called lamentation. In many cultures, so-called the upper class, they are told not to express their emotions too openly. So you're not supposed to cry or make a lot of noise when someone dies. But among the poorer people, among the people who are more family-oriented, you find they express themselves very loudly. Someone passes away, and when you hear it, you can sense that suffering they're going through, right? And then, of course, 16 is quite direct, quite clear. What also is physical pain. Also, whatever bodily pain, bodily unpleasantness, painful or unpleasant feeling arising from bodily contact. This also is called physical pain. So physical pain can arise by itself within the body, or it can come from outside, from trauma, as we say. So this is number 16, right? So let's go further down. 17. Yes. Okay, up. Yes, a bit more. Yeah. And what also is mental pain or displeasure. Also, whatever mental pain, mental unpleasantness, painful or unpleasant feeling arising from mental contact, in other words, from thinking, from a thought that comes to our mind. This also is called mental pain. Right? Even thoughts can bring us suffering, right? Sometimes a single memory, a single word can cause suffering. 18. And what also is despair. Well, this is a very powerful word, despair. Also once being touched by some misfortune, by some painful state, stress, distress, despair, desperation. This also is called despair. Sense of loss of hope, for example, right? And there are other, in the later suttas you find there are other kinds of suffering listed. Then 19, and what also is not getting what one wants. Okay, here Sariputta gives some details, not getting what one wants. First example, in being subject to birth, also this wish arises. Oh, that we were not subject to birth, that we might not come to be born. But this cannot be won by wishing. Not getting what one wants is suffering, right? So sometimes you want to say, oh, it's better not to be born, full of suffering, but you can't, it happens. Then number 2, beings are subject to decay. When among those who notice decay, aging, they say, oh, that we were not subject to decay, that we might not come to decay, but we don't grow old. Isn't it wonderful we don't grow old? They think that way, right? But then you can't wish all this. Some religions try to tell you all these nice memories and possibilities, but it doesn't happen. It's just empty words. Same thing with 3, for those, we're all subject to disease, sickness. And then we say, oh, if only we don't get sick. But it happens, still happens. Number 4, death occurs to everyone. But we wish we won't die. We wish our loved ones especially won't die. Now, one of the things about growing old, especially like Rana and I now at this age, we find many of our good old friends have passed away. Our loving relatives have passed away, and you feel quite sad and lonely. You say, oh, look at all these people, they are going away, and we won't see them again. And the young people don't know us, and they do not want to know us because they're busy with their own fun and joy. So we begin to treasure what friends we have left, and these friends are important to us. Okay. Oops, I've lost the sutta. Okay, here we are, coming back. Okay. Just give Wendy a few minutes. Okay, here we are. Right, so then disease, death, number 5, all right? In being subject to sorrow, lamentation, pain, anguish, and despair, this wish arises. Oh, that we were not subject to sorrow, lamentation, pain, anguish, despair. As if only we don't have to suffer like this. Yeah? It can't happen, right? And then the last one, here, section 20. All right, so here the number is, I wonder how we got the number 8 here. I think there's a bit of typo here. I will check this later. Actually, it should be 6, I think, right? Because 8 here belongs to the Dhammacakka Sutta. Anyway, and what I will show are in brief the 5 aggregates of clinging that are suffering. This is the most important of all. When we study Dhamma, this is what we should know. The aggregate of clinging that is form, the aggregate of clinging that is feeling, the aggregate of clinging that is perception, the aggregate of clinging that is, or that are, formations, the aggregate of clinging that is consciousness, right? So this is what we are. We are the 5 aggregate of clinging. Whereas in the case of the Arahats, including the Buddha, they are simply the 5 aggregates, Panchakanda, without the word clinging in it, because they don't cling to it. Whereas in the case of unawakened beings like us, it is Panchupadana Kanda. Upadana means clinging, right? So all this also is called the noble truth that is suffering. So there you are. Sariputta has given this very comprehensive suffering, comprehensive definition of suffering. Then he goes on next to the noble truth, that is the arising of suffering. 21. And what is the noble truth? That is the arising of suffering. It is this craving that leads to renewed existence or to rebirth. Remember, when you see these square brackets, it's a kind of a, what's called alternate translation. To renewed existence, or you can say to rebirth. Accompanied by pleasure and lust, seeking pleasure here and there, that is to say, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for non-existence. This also is called a noble truth, that is the arising of suffering. So suffering arises because we are caught up in the desire for more and more pleasurable sense experiences. And because we have this desire, we also do not like sense experiences that are different from what brings us joy and pleasure. And we also feel bored when we cannot identify whether it is pleasant or not. So this is one, right? The thing is, although we have 5 senses, we enjoy seeing things, smelling things, and hearing music and so on. But these same senses also bring us suffering when we don't enjoy what we are experiencing. Now, craving for existence here refers to the 2 important meanings. One is we want to be this, we want to be that, achievement-oriented. The other is we want to be reborn in the heavens, happy states, and so on. And this also brings us suffering because we keep desiring this, but we don't work for it. So suffering comes. So some people then think, okay, in that case, I don't want to live. So if I kill myself, maybe, this is my only life, so I won't suffer. These are the materialists. They think that their mind or soul, the body are the same. So they kill the body, they won't be reborn. Not true. You will be reborn. And because you kill yourself, you'll be reborn in a suffering state, right? So these are the 3 kinds of craving from which suffering arises. Now we come to the next one, C 22. And what I will say is a noble truth, that is the ending of suffering. It is the utter fading away and ending of that very craving, right? Giving it up, letting it go, being free from it, being detached from that craving. This is nirvana, of course, although not mentioned here. Letting go of the craving. This also is called the noble truth, that is the ending of suffering. And then you come to the path, 23. And what also is the noble truth, that is the path leading to the ending of suffering. It is this noble eightfold path, that is to say, right view, right intention, or right thought, right? So these 2 have to do with wisdom, okay? And then right speech, right action, right livelihood. This has to do with moral virtue. And then the right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This is samadhi, okay, concentration. So these are the 3 trainings. Right view comes first. Right view is number 1 because right view pervades, underpins all the other 7 factors. Otherwise, they won't be called right or noble. All right. So these are the Eightfold Path. Then Sariputta goes on to define each of this. And what also is right view? Also, this is the knowledge of suffering, the knowledge of the arising of suffering, the knowledge of the ending of suffering, and the knowledge of the path leading to the ending of suffering. This also is called right view. Now, the meaning is this: we suffer because we do not have the right knowledge. We do not really understand what is suffering. Yeah, we talk about suffering and we even help people with suffering, but we don't really know what is the arising, how it ends, and how to end it. So we don't have that right knowledge. That is why we are suffering. Okay. So right view is understanding what suffering is. Okay, let's go further down. Right intention, right? What is right intention? Also, it is the thought of renunciation. Here, renunciation doesn't mean letting go. It's a broad sense. Nekama. It means letting go of worldliness, letting go of craving, being happy with what we are right now. It doesn't mean not to do anything, not at all. On the contrary, renunciation, you need to put a lot of effort to let go of laziness, for example, right? Because our minds are always telling, excusing, giving us excuses not to do this, not to do that. So you have to let go of those ideas of laziness. So letting go of any kind of unwholesome state. The thought it is a thought of non-malice, not thinking of anything bad towards anyone. The thought of harmlessness, of non-violence even, not acting out, not thinking of acting out any nasty, any violence towards anyone. So this is called 3 intentions that are right. About right speech. Okay, now you come to the moral aspect, the moral practice of the body, body including speech. Right speech is refraining from lying, from slander, from harsh speech, and from frivolous talk. These are the 4 kinds of wrong speeches. And this is the speech aspect of moral virtue. This is all summarized in the 4th precept. And then you have the first 3 precepts are very clear here. Number 27. You have refraining from taking life, refraining from taking the not given, refraining from sexual misconduct. When we refrain in this way, it's called right action, right? So here we see the first 3 precepts. So this is where it comes from. Yeah? And then we come to not just keeping the precepts, we also make sure that when we earn a living, it is right. Here is a very simple definition. Here, also the noble disciple, having given up wrong livelihood, supports himself through right livelihood. Here, the sutta doesn't go into detail. Sariputta doesn't go into detail. This will be given later in other suttas. So here, to focus the teaching, it's just given a very simple definition. In other words, what Sariputta is saying, what the Buddha is saying, we will define this in greater detail at a proper time. All right. Here is enough to say, not practicing any kind of wrong livelihood. Then we come to the training in meditation, in samadhi, right? That is 6. And what avuso is right effort. Here avuso, a monk. Here monk means a practitioner, meditator, rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives. Okay, remember this sentence repeats itself. No? So you can see everything is italicized. Puts in energy in one word to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. So the key word here is prevent, restrain. You can see the Pali word sangvara. Padana here is one of the synonyms for effort. Vayama also can, viriya also can. So sangvara, to restrain, to prevent. He makes an effort to abandon evil that is already arisen. Okay, notice here arisen, here unarisen, right? When something bad has not arisen, for example, you have not smoked before, so you keep it that way. The practice of non-action, action of non-action, very interesting here, right? And if you have been, say, smoking, then stop. Okay, if you've been drinking, stop it, abandon it, right? So pahana means give up, let go. So these 2 refers to, 1 and 2 refers to unwholesome actions, bad habits. And then the 3 and 4 are wholesome actions. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind. Notice the mind is involved also, and strives to cultivate unreasoned, wholesome mental states. For example, you've not meditated before, you've not done loving kindness before, cultivate it, right? So cultivate, bhavana, see this Pali word here? To cultivate it, to bring into being something good you've not done before. And then number 4, he rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen. So the key word here is to maintain, to keep it going. And the Pali word is anurakkhana. Right? Rakha means protect, anurakkhana, to go on to make sure you don't lose that practice. Keep up your positive energy. So this is called right effort. These are the 4 right efforts. And what Avuso is right mindfulness. Okay, here Avuso amongst practices the 4 satipatthana. Okay, notice here, having put away covetousness and displeasure in the world among dwells, exertive, fully aware, mindful, contemplating body in the body. So you find all this in the Satipatthana Sutta. This is Kayanupassana. The main practice here, the best known, is of course watching the breath, meditating on the body, body as body, not body as something else, or body in the body. You keep your mind there. Number 2, having put away covetousness and displeasure in the world means to overcome the 5 mental hindrances. We let go of sensual desire, ill will, and so on, so that we can focus our mind and attain jhana as far as possible. At this mental focus, by contemplating feeling in feelings, we watch the nature of feeling, arising, passing away, impermanence of feelings. Vedananupassana. Number 3, keeping our mind focused, letting go of all the hindrances. We contemplate mind in the mind. We observe the nature of thoughts, also impermanent, and so on. And then number 4, we watch Dharma in Dhammas. Dharma here is a reality, meaning things like Four Noble Truth, what they call this mental hindrances, the factors of awakening and so on arise in our meditation. We watch it and we remember it and so on. So this is the 4th cultivation, the 4th contemplation, anupassana. So these are the 4. And this is the 7th limb or 7th factor, mindfulness. And then the last one, the 8th factor, is right concentration. So from mindfulness, you get to concentration. These are the 4 jhanas. And it's quite direct. The Sariputta mentions first dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, 4th dhyana. Number 1 here was so among detached from sensual pleasures, detached from unwholesome mental states, enters and dwells in the 1st dhyana. Right? So here again, having overcome all the 5 mental hindrances, beginning with sensual pleasures, he attains the 1st jhana, which has initial application and sustained application. These are the remnants of thought. The mind is there, keeping it focused, and it feels joyful, very powerful joy, and here a sense of calm joy, because we are letting go of the world. So this is 1st jhana, Patama jhana. Then in the 2nd jhana, the stilling of initial application and sustained application. In other words, the thought, normal thinking, it goes away, and there is inner calm and oneness of mind, mental focus. Then the person attains the 2nd jhana, free from initial application, sustained application. Initial application is directing the mind to the object. Sustain means you keep it there. Okay, so in this case, there is still the zest and the happiness comes from the mental concentration, 2nd jhana. So the joy becomes more powerful in that sense. In the 3rd jhana, you have some more of the jhana factors going away. There are less factors. Okay, So here with the fading away of zest, this zest is a very powerful sense of joy. It comes down, in other words, as the mind becomes more settled, equanimous, upekkha, equanimous, neutral, so to speak. And yet there is this sense of joy with the body. The body feels comfortable. Here, happiness is understood in the sense of the bodily feels no pain. There is this comfort, so that the mind doesn't bother about it. The mind stays focused, and the mind goes into the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare happily he dwells in equanimity and mindfulness. The mind is balanced and calm. And then number 4, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain and the earlier disappearance of joy and grief. So mental aspects of pain and pleasure and pain, physical aspect, mental aspect, all gone. So in the 4th dhyana, there is neither joy nor sorrow, equanimity, total equanimity, great peace. So there you are. This also is what is called the noble truth, that is the path leading to the ending of suffering. Okay, so this completes the Eightfold Path. So now Sariputta repeats the refrain, says, well, this is the teaching of the wheel of truth, the Dhammacakka, that no one can stop once the Buddha teaches it. That is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So there you are. You notice that the whole sutta here actually focuses on the Four Noble Truths. Elsewhere in the Anuradha Sutta, the Buddha says, only one thing do I teach: suffering and the ending of suffering. Those are the 2 truths. So suffering here means suffering number 1, number 2, and ending of suffering is 3 and 4, right? So that is the 2-4 version. This is the 4 Noble Truth, the full set version. This is what the Venerable Sariputta said. The monks rejoice and approve of the Venerable Sariputta's word. Okay, so here instead of the Buddha and Sariputta's teaching, and this is as good as the Buddha himself teaching. So notice here, it's not the Buddha that teaches the Dhamma, it's Sariputta. So here we have this really interesting emphasis to show that the Dhamma is above everyone. Even the Buddha looks up to the Dhamma. So in that sense, early Buddhism is not a cult. It's not because simply because the Buddha says so. It is because what the Buddha says is the Dhamma. And what Sariputta says is the Dhamma too, right? So it is the teaching that is what is important here. And that is why even today we say we should put the teaching above the teacher in that sense. So even though the Buddha may not be with us, the Dhamma is still there, and that is good enough for us. And right here today, we are sitting here, we are listening to this sutta. So this is the Satya Vibhanga Sutta. Sadhu. Okay, and here now we come to question.
Thank you, Brother Pia. Now I pass the session to Sister Axine for the question and answer.
Thank you, Sister Wendy.
Thank you.
Sadhu Brother Pia for the sutta teaching. Brother and sister, if you have any questions, you may unmute yourself and ask your questions verbally. Brother Pia, at the moment, there's no question in the chat box.
Okay, we wait a while. Time you're ready, just ask the questions. Sometimes it's so clear. Now we find many of these teachings are familiar to us, but here it is laid out in a very systematic way, and we begin to see something interesting here, where the monks are listening to Sariputta teaching, and from there you have an idea how the first discourse was composed as a sutta, right? So that we have an idea what the Buddha taught the first 5 months. So remember to read the introductory notes also. There's quite a lot of teachings about Sariputta and Moggallana about spiritual friendship. In fact, Sariputta Morgana, they are kind of the ideal spiritual friends, if you like. Even between the two of them, they're good friends. And the way they treat their students also show how a teacher should be a spiritual friend to their students. If you...
So, Brother LCO raised his hand.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Brother LCO, you can ask a question now.
Okay. Basically, this Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path has been with me since I started Buddhism. And during those times, I read just the heading, which is just simply Four Noble Truths. You know, and then the Eightfold Path with the specific one-liner sentence that first noble truth, you know, the cause of there is suffering. Second noble truth, the cause of the suffering. Third noble truth, there is end to suffering. And the fourth noble truth, there's a way to end the suffering.
Yes.
So during those times, take it as a very simple, straightforward, and because the meaning is very direct. So to me, this first discourse is actually very good and easy to comprehend because it is very direct.
Yeah, in detail. So
very direct, but the word itself is really direct. And I mean, going through knowing the five aggregate, those are more elaborative. So I feel that this discourse should be more explored to everyone, you know, and act as a frontliner, or already is already a first discourse. Already by itself is already a first discourse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that this itself is sufficient for any beginner to start off with?
Oh yes, of course. If you have good English, and you can start with the Dhammacakka Sutta first, so just the Four Noble Truths. And then for elaboration of the Four Noble Truths, you come here. In a sense, you know, you find this sutta is easier than the Dhammacakka Sutta, because the Dhammacakka Sutta has got quite a number of philosophical sections, which can be quite deep. That shows that it was a later compilation during the Buddha's lifetime. Whereas this one just talks only about the Four Noble Truths. In fact, some teachers even call this the second turning of the wheel, as it were. Of course, the wheel needs to turn only once. This is the second teaching of the Four Noble Truths, as it were. But I'm sure the Buddha and the monks, Arhat monks, have been teaching of the Four Truths over many times to the thousands of monks, right? Yes, this is in many ways an easier sutta to study if you want to know the details of the Four Noble Truths. Okay. Any other question or feedback?
One more thing about the Eightfold Path, or the Eightfold Path, which in the past actually has been a lot of difficulty trying to memorize the 8 items.
Yeah.
But when I joined Buddhist Fellowship, this Engineer Mangsir has come up with this very good so-called short form, which is a UT Sales MC. So UT Sales MC will be right understanding, right thought UT, and SALE, S-A-L-E, will be right speech, right action, right livelihood, and right effort. And the last one, MC, will be right mindfulness and right concentration. So this short form is easy to remember. I just want to share with everyone. Yeah.
Good. You have learned something. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can also give feedback if you like. Yeah.
Thank you, Brother FCU. Brother Pia, there's a question from Sister Liu Hyuk.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, she's asking, 5 aggregates of clinging equal to suffering. She's confused. Does it mean that the 5 aggregates are clinging, or does it mean that it's the clinging to the 5 aggregate that leads to suffering, or is it both that lead to suffering?
Well, if we can say, you can look either way. But the simple answer is the mind. It's the mind that clings. The aggregates are just things out there, if you like. Okay, so there is this famous sutta which we'll be studying, where the Buddha says the world out there is neutral, right? It is our attachment, our mind looking at all these things with greed, hate, delusion, that is suffering, that's the clinging. So the five aggregates are form, right? You start with form, the body. The body is just 4 elements, right? So we can't say it's good or it's bad, it's just the 4 elements. Yeah, we can say it's impermanent, you know. But when we attach to it, that brings us suffering. That's the meaning here. When we are not attached to it, we also feel suffering, we feel pain, see, but that's different kind of suffering. That's physical pain. That one will go away. Doctors can help you overcome it. Then things change, things break. Then you buy new things. Again, you might even feel happy buying new things. Again, it's not so bad. That kind of suffering also can be overcome. But the last one, the suffering of the 5 aggregates, the body keeps getting sick, the body decays. You see old friends really becoming old. That is suffering. You feel sad about it. And then you have feelings. Feelings change. You get hurt because of feelings, right? So we cling to feelings, so we suffer. And then perception also. Perception is a bit more tricky. How we see things, how we recognize things, we get attached to pleasant things. We push away, we try to push away things which are unpleasant. So that is perception. And sin, and also causes suffering because of this. We have to all the time keep doing this. And then the sankhara refers to our intentions. We notice how these thoughts arise. And this karma, whether you think of it or not, it comes back to act on you. You bear the fruit. Then there's this consciousness, which is the most tricky of all. We may not notice much of it, but that is what causes us to suffer, to feel pain, for example. So when we understand what these 5 aggregates are, then they teach us. Suffering is meant to teach us. Then we will not suffer so much. Then we feel at peace. So let this suffering, let these aggregates teach us what is true reality. So that's the way it should be, yeah? So that's why it's called the aggregates of clinging. It's because when you have these 5 aggregates, you tend to cling to them. You tend to want more of them. You want the pleasant aspect and you push away the negative aspect. Okay, hope that clears things up a bit. All right.
Thank you, Brother Pia. The next question from Brother Tam.
Sure.
Brother Pia, how many Dharma turning wheels are there in Buddhism? In Theravada, the one at Deer Park was often referred as a Dharma turning wheel.
Yes.
Mahayana teachings say there are 3.
Well, just as we say, fire only needs to be invented once, the wheel needs only to be invented once. So it's enough for the Buddha to arise. And once the Buddha arises, by definition, he teaches the Dharma, and that is called the turning of the Dharma wheel. Yeah. So that one time is enough. So for those of you who accept early Buddhism, just say that's enough. Later Buddhism, as they go far away from India and because of the influence of culture and so on, so they begin to add on things. They begin to adjust what they see as foreign to reflect more of their culture. So they start talking about, oh, you have 3 turnings, this teacher, that teacher, and so on. And so people talk a lot of things, not through understanding of the Dhamma. It's because of their own desire to promote themselves. Say, well, this is my idea, okay? And this is something people should know, that I'm teaching this. So it is something else. It's not the teaching of the Buddha in that sense. So it's quite enough to say one turning of the wheel is good enough, right? Even this Satyavibhanga Sutta, although some teachers say it's like the second turning, we don't say like, but it's not second turning. It's just an elaboration, if you like, it's a commentary on the Four Noble Truths. So that we can talk in different ways. We can say it's a commentary, explanation of the first turning of the wheel, yes. Perhaps we should not say, when we say first turning, we're not saying there is a second, third, or fourth. Perhaps we should only say the turning of the wheel. For example, now you look at the sutta name, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, simply means the turning of the wheel of Dhamma. That's all. The turning of the wheel of Dhamma. There is no first turning of the wheel of Dhamma, right? It's simply turning of the wheel of Dhamma. So there's no second, third, or fourth. Once it's turned, no one can turn it back. No one can turn it back. That means there's no second, third, fourth turning, all right? So it's quite clear from the sutta itself. All right, so I hope that's clear enough. Yeah?
Thank you, Brother Pia. There's no more question in the chat box at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, okay. We have about 10 minutes more. So let's just sit back and if some questions come to you.
Brother Pia, there's
Yes.
a question from Brother LC. Sir Pia, can we take the first discourse of the Four Noble Truths as law of life or Buddhism as to, number one, there are suffering in life undeniable. Second, there are ways to end suffering undeniable. And third, suffering in life can be ended undeniable. And fourth, there are ways to end the suffering.
Yeah, of course, we can say that you can't deny the truth, right? The first truth is suffering, arising of suffering, ending of suffering, the path. Yeah, they are undeniable. If we deny them, then of course we won't know what they are. Then you find suffering still comes. So you will not be wise to do that, isn't it? Okay, yeah, we all understand different ways, and then from there we progress. Remember, progress. You don't stand still. You don't get stuck in your views. A view is just a way of looking, one view only, right? We look at one side of the mountain, we got to move on. The path is such, you got to move on. You don't stay on the path, you move on the path. That's why the Buddha's teaching is called the path. You keep moving. Streamwinner, one-returner, non-returner, arahat, like that. Maybe we move slowly, but we still keep moving. Okay? So,
Thank you, Brother Pia.
yes, okay.
There's a reply from Brother Tam.
Sure.
He mentioned, would I not accept there are three views? For him, it's not too important. He
Right.
mentioned that the wheel has always been turning.
Yes, that's another way of looking at it, yeah. Every time you practice, you are turning the wheel, right? Something like that. So the idea is to be curious. See the Dhamma as, I don't know what's going on. I want to find out, right? So you're curious. So because you're curious, wisdom comes to you, right? For example, the suttas, I've taught them many times before, but each time I study it, I look at it again, I say, wow, I see something new here. Otherwise, you will say, oh no, it's the same sutta every time, you know, right? So we don't think about it in that way. So this way, let me give you a simple example. Imagine, I've said this before, 20 years ago, if I told myself, oh, all these 20 years, I'm going to do sutta work. I said, wow, 20 years, that's a long time. It's a burden, you know. You don't feel like doing it already. And if I say, oh, I'm going to write 80 volumes I'm going to translate 80 volumes of sutta. I'm going to spend this whole year, 2022, writing essays, you know. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. You just feel terrified, you feel bored and so on. So it's very important to understand it's the mind that tries to distract you, and that's Mara. So for example, if I tell myself, oh, I got this essay to write, you know, and I don't feel happy about it, then I'll be discouraged. I tell myself, I ask myself this question, what have I written so far? Let me just read it. I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to read it. Then I read what I've written, I say, oh, this is interesting. Then an idea comes to me. See, because when you look at the Dharma, something else will arise in you. And then I say, oh yes, this is what I should write. And then it grows from there. And then I find there's a lot of things I could write about. And that's how, you know, from one short idea, I thought I can just, you know, do it in one volume. I ended up with 3 volumes, and I'm still writing it for this year to celebrate 20 years of Sutta work. So this is my advice to proofreaders. There are a number of you who are proofreaders, and you're very important for quality control. You know, we want all these teachings to be clear, as much of error-free as possible in a human sense. Never tell yourself, oh, I got 20 pages to read, or even 10 pages to proof. You just say, let me see, what can I read today? What is something new? Maybe I'll just read one paragraph, and then you look at it, you find, oh, okay, there's a typo here. And then you correct it. But once you clear a typo, you're helping future readers to understand better. You know, there are scholars who are very unforgiving, you know. They see a translation, a bit of error, they say, oh, this translator is not clever, you know, it's got errors, and then they just discard it. But they don't realize when they write papers, they also make errors. Even the best scholars have some errors, not because they are not right. It just happens. This is human error. So don't see yourself going to do something big. Just say, for this moment, I'm going to just look at this. What is this line? What is this passage? And then from there, you become curious, and then you go on working that way. Another advice I give to readers is, the moment you feel tired, a bit dull about it, you stop. That's enough for today. So just stop a while, do something else, do what needs to be done, and then you come back later to do your work. Right? So it's okay to take a break, for example. So this is how, for example, we do Sutta translation, Sutta work, proofreading, and these are all important aspects of what's going on here in our 20 years of work. Yeah? Because this is something, it's not for one person to do. We do it together, right? Each of us doing our part. We have to proofread, we study the Sutta, we tell people about it. That's what it's all about, all these 2,500 years. Okay, you have a couple more minutes to go.
Brother Pia, Brother Yasuya, I would like to highlight his error on his statement just now for the number 2. He said there are reasons to the suffering undeniable.
Oh.
Yeah, the second one.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
It's all there's no more question in the chat box.
All right. Okay, so this normally I don't do this, but this is one occasion I need to make a small announcement. The mining center, that is, we have decommissioned our old photocopy machine after serving us 5 years very well, and the machine really has gone through decay. And so we have contacted our company that we contracted this, and we've taken a new machine and signed up for the contract. The contract is good because they repair for us and so on, and this printing is very important for us. So we have got this new machine. It's a Canon machine. We print our Sutta notes, which we submit 2 copies every time to the National Library. The National Library preserves our Suttas in the reference section, the Li Kongchen reference section. So if you want to help with this new machine, we need your help here, of course. We had to pay a certain amount of money, and I don't like to tell the amount. We will publish this in the on the Telegram so that you can know what it is. You can either give what you can or give the whole amount. We'll leave it to you. Any extra amount, of course, will go to stationery, papers, and we always need them for printing. And so just to inform you of our project, which we need your help, right? So do look out for the announcement on this photocopier machine. By the way, it's also very useful because we connect it directly to our computer and we don't need to buy printers. We use the photocopy machine as a printer. It's really wonderful, very clear printing. So this is a great help to our work. Yeah. So please make a note on this, Dana. Just keep this in mind and to help our work, help us in our work. So, and with that, I think if there's no questions, so we can end here.
We take photos, please.
Yeah. Oh yes, please. Show yourselves. Yeah, very good. We're very happy to see you all.
Oh, got the baby. Your baby, yeah.
Grandchild, huh? Very good.
Yeah, my grandson.
Imagine you record this and then 10 years later I can show him or her again. All right. It's very nice to see you all. It's already September, no? How the time flies.
Okay.
So do take care of your health. Health is wealth, as they say. And in Buddhism too, we say health is the greatest gain. The greatest profit is health. Yeah? So take care of your health, exercise. And this a weekend to spend time with yourself and take care of your health also.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
Sister
now,
Wendy, yeah, you can end the
yeah.
class.
So anything else, Wendy, you want to say?
Nothing else.
So, okay, so we
Close
can.
now.
All right. So now let us finish this very important moment to recall to mind we have done some wholesome, wonderful, good deeds. We have practiced a bit of renunciation. We have renounced the world. Remember, you have renounced the world for 2 hours. You left behind many, many other things you could have done for the fun of it. But here you are. You have spent about 2 hours keeping, showing homage to the Buddha, keeping the 5 precepts. You have done some meditation, and you have studied the Dhamma, asked questions, and so on. These are all very good practice. Remember this moment. This will help you in your future meditations to give you inner peace. Remember this. It's very important to remember it so that it becomes an inner reality, a mental reality for you to in time to come. And above all, we show our gratitude to the Buddha, who has arisen in this time and who has taught the Dhamma for our benefit to this day. And we aspire to protect it as truly as we can, to study the true, direct and simple teachings, and to, above all, to understand it and to share it with others. And we bow down to the Buddha in gratitude. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. And to the Dhamma we bow. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, Dhammang Namasami. And to the noble Sangha, the Arhats and other saints, we bow down. Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho, Sanghang Namam. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, a happy weekend to everyone.